thanks for joining me again. I am on the Spitfire once again. I'm going to go for a little bit of a service. So we've got what I would consider a full service on a classic car. So we've got oil and filter change, pair of air filters, fuel filter, distributor cap, rotor arm, points condenser, spark plugs and ignition leads as well. And then once we get it all sorted and up and running, we are going to have to set the ignition timing because I've had the distributor off, and also I'll probably play about with the carbs as well since I've had them off and rebuilt. So yeah, should be fairly straightforward, but you know, nothing ever goes to plan, does it? So let's get out there and have a look and get some bits together and start cracking on. Right then, so we've got our nice little box of servicey bits. Got some oil, 2050, spark plugs. In here we've got rocker cover gasket, ignition leads. In here we've also got points, rotor arm, condenser, the fuel filter, a pair of air filters, oil filter, and a distributor cap. And we'll also be setting the valve clearances and also resetting the ignition timing. So we'll get all of this chucked on. Should be fairly straightforward. Do the tabbets and then we can start getting the engine up and running after that carburetor rebuild that I did. I've got the book here and I've marked a few pages just for spark plug gaps, points, things like that, so I can find them easy. It's all easy stuff really. I sourced all of this stuff from online. Something I did find quite annoying was I couldn't buy all of this as a kit. There is some suppliers that do a service kit, but it didn't include everything that I would consider you need a change in a service, and they weren't in stock anyway. I'm not going to name drop because it isn't fair, but yeah, I think there's a real gap in the market for a service kit. If you don't really know what you're looking for and you just want to go to one place. I had to go to 3 different places to buy all this. So to me, I think that's just a bit daft, but whatever. So let's start. Let's get bonnet open, put some new bits on. I'm going to start with the fuel filter. Now this is not original. This wouldn't have happened. This wouldn't have had this from the factory. Somebody's added this in, but I do strongly recommend, especially in this day and age, that you have a fuel filter on, just purely because the quality of fuel nowadays is absolutely shocking, and you can see that that's already dirty in there. I don't know how long this has been on. I suppose the downside is you are introducing more points for potential fuel leaks. So obviously this would have had a metal pipe straight through the tank and has have to been chopped to put this in. But I think that is a fair trade-off for keeping your fuel quality nice and clean. Got a new one here. These are only a couple of quid from Motor Factors online, wherever you want to get it from. You can get nice fancy glass ones, but I'm just going to change like for like. So I've got this. I've put on some new pieces of fuel hose just because I can see a few little cracks starting at the top of these pipes here. And I don't want to run the risk of them splitting, so I've already gone ahead and chucked the pipe on. If you're going to replace pipe, do make sure that it is proper fuel pipe. You can see there that did say unleaded before I chopped it and put a clamp in it. It needs to be rated for fuel. You can see there they're reinforced. If you just use rubber pipe that's for coolant or vacuum or whatever, the fuel will just absolutely destroy it, and then you have a big leak. So I need to be relatively quick here because as soon as I disconnect the bottom of the pipe, it is going to gush fuel out. These clips aren't the best clips in the world. I might see if I've got some better ones later. a wiggle in. Right, I just took the filter end up there, and then there we go. You can see how fast that filter's filled up already, just with the gravity from the tank. Oop, there we go. There we go. There we are. Oh, that's not very tight, is it? Oop, sorry. Get that pushed in. There we go. Nip this up while we're here because it's clearly not tight enough. Oh, check the other one while we're on. Rude not to, wouldn't it? Yeah. Alright then. Fuel filter done. I'll obviously check this for leaks when we are up and running. Right, so next I'm going to do all the things that are inside the distributor. You can do this kind of service stuff in any order. It doesn't really make much difference. Pop the cap off. I'm going to pop the centre coil lead out because we know where that one goes, you can't get it wrong. I'm just going to drop the dizzy out of the way. Is this light going to behave itself? I'll try. Right, so now the dizzy's out of the way. Now I need to do a little bit of explaining with this. This is not the distributor that was on the car when it got to me. If you look back in the video when I got it up and running, you'll notice that this is a different distributor. This is what I think is the original distributor, and the reason I've changed it is because this cable here actually goes in at the bottom of the distributor there, is the drive for the rev counter. And the distributor that I had in didn't have that. It was a later one. This is what I think is the original one. I'm not really sure why it was changed. The one that I had on it was a Lucas 45D, which is off it was fitted to lots of classic cars, but it was mainly off a later Spitfire. And I've checked this one, and it does work, it does spark. So I'm not really sure why it was changed, but in my eyes, if there's nothing wrong with this one, I'd rather have this one on because I can make the rev counter work. So I've just flipped the cap over there, and I've left all the plug leads on because you need them in the right order. If you're confident you can get them back in the right place, feel free to whip them off. Rotor arm just pops off. We're going to leave that out of the way for now. So we have got in here, this is the points, and this is the condenser. Now the points in here don't actually look that bad, but I'm just going to change them as a matter of course anyway, because they're inexpensive, and if they go wrong you'll be buggered. Obviously make sure you've got the right bits. Looks like it, doesn't it? It's quite glary there, isn't it? Sorry guys, try not to blind roll. Right, so we need to undo these two screws. This one is the adjuster. This one is... oh, I see it's on like a little cam there, isn't it? So we should be able to just... that's quite clever, that. It's on. You can see how that works. Anyway, should be able to just slide that out of there now. And these should disconnect out there. They just loop off. It's a good job of changing this. Look at that rust on there. now we've got that out, the condenser can come out. And you can drop all your little screws like an absolute wallop. New condenser. Does it fit? Just about fits, I think. It's a little bit bigger than the original one. I don't think that's going to be a huge problem. There we go, it is a little bit bigger, but it just about clears that spindle in the middle, shaft, whatever you want to call it. I like to put them behind just because, in my eyes, I can't drop off if it's behind. Put it in front of here, you've got the risk of that just waffing off, whereas behind, it'll be the force of the spring will actually keep this all connected together. Some points you'll find have a little screw holds that on, or like a proper wiring connector kind of thing. On the little peg. There we go. Make sure we're all the way on. There we are, right. So let's put the little screw back in. No, don't lose it. Don't drop any more little screws on the floor in the dark. Right. So, I haven't tightened that up because we need to adjust it. But before we adjust it, we need to be on the peak of one of these little lobes. And the way we do that is just by turning the engine over. I can just about get my hand on the crankshaft. It says with confidence. I have to go around the next one. There we go, right. So you can see now the little runner is on the top of this pointy piece here. Just kind of get that in focus for you. So now we need to set this gap here. Obviously that is far too big, it's massive. So how do we, there we go. Tighten that up a bit just to get the height right. This is very clever, this one. You can see that adjusts it. Or you can also put your little screwdriver in this slot and adjust it there. So we need to have a look at the book to find out what that gap should be. Okay, over then. So I'm in the Haynes manual. Can you see that? Ignition system. We have got a Delco Remy distributor, which is this top one here. I can't quite get that in shot. There we are. Delco Remy distributor. Contact points gap. 14 thou to 16 thou, or you've got it in millimeters there. 14 to 16. I've got some feeler gauges there, and I've got one that is 15 thou, so that is perfect. So it's dead easy. We need this gap to be as wide as this feeler gauge. We're a little bit big at the minute. Now you'll know you've got this right when you put the feeler gauge in. Neither of these contacts moves, and you can't push that out of the way. and make the gap bigger, so the gap is constant. And what you're looking for in a feeler gauge is just a light drag. You shouldn't have to force it in and jam it in, but equally you shouldn't be able to just waff it in and out. There should be a little bit of drag, a little bit of resistance, a little bit like adjusting brakes. I think that's a tiny bit tight. Wrong one. That's now too loose, so just... There we go. I'm just going to nip that up. And as I've nipped it up, it's got bigger. I was just about to say, always check after you tighten it up, because sometimes when you clamp things down it moves. And it did just that. There we go. It's got a nice drag. Now over the first few 100 miles these are going to bed in, and that gap's going to get quite big, just as things bed in and wear sets in. So I'm going to recommend that this car comes back, or I go and visit the car after the first 150, 200 miles maybe even 500, just to reset that gap. Just as things bed in and wear, that gap will get bigger. Yeah, super. Oh, nip that up. Nip that up. Sorted. That was in there done. New rotor arm. Make sure it matches the original one. Yep. Now these have a little peg on them, which locates into that little slot. There we go. Now we can put the rotor arm on. The distributor cap, sorry, I've just done the rotor arm in there. Right, distributor cap, same again. Check this is the same as the original one. So we've got a little locating lug here, got a gap there and a little peg on this side. That's just located on the distributor. Yeah, that's the right one. So there we go, that's on there. There we go. Now this is loose because I deliberately left it loose when I fitted the distributor, because we're going to need to change this when we do the ignition timing. So don't worry that that's wobbly. Normally in service conditions that won't be wobbly. Mine's wobbly on purpose. Now we can change the leads and the spark plugs. So I'm going to do these one at a time, just so we don't lose where we are. Before we get into whipping the leads and plugs out, I'm just going to check the new spark plugs. So these are Champion plugs, which is what is recommended in the manual. When you get the spark plug out the box, you need to make sure that it hasn't been dropped, so make sure the porcelain isn't cracked, make sure that the terminal isn't too tight, isn't touching the other electrode. Now these should be the right gap out of the box, however I never trust anybody, so I've got myself a little spark plug gapping tool. And this is really clever because it's got this rim around the edge, which is different thickness all the way around. So it's thin there, and this side it's dead thick. And it's got a little gauge on it, inches that side, millimeters this side. And we've also got this little circle that you can pop in there for opening up the gap, and a little flat bit that you can tap on for closing the gap. Really dead handy. I find this much easier to use than feeler gauges for spark plugs. You can just use feeler gauges, makes no odds really. Now back in the book, we've got Champion NY9s, spark plug gap, 25 thou or 0.64 millimeters. 25 thou, 0.64 millimeters. So let's have a look. So you just slide that in there. And I can see already that this is far too tight, because I can't even get that in there. So it's a good job I checked, isn't it? So just tease that open, 25 thou. I've gone past it. Lay that on something. Give it a tap. About 26 there. Don't you start. The light has been very temperamental because I forgot to charge it. Remember to charge my microphone, forgot to charge the light. There we go, you can see now. We're at 25,000. Just about. There we go. Get it square. So that plug is now ready to fit. I'm going to do the other three, then we can change them. Right then, so plugs are all gapped. Pull a lead off. Doesn't matter where you start really. Start at one end. I have already had these out. If you'd watched the first video I did on this car where we got the engine running for the first time, I did check and clean the plugs off just as a precautionary. There we go. And get the new plug. Make sure it's a match. The part number's right, so it should be, but always double check. And then put that in your hole. Now these don't need to be insanely tight. There will be a torque setting for them if you really want to, but as an experienced mechanic you kind of just get the feel for that. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to fit the leads. I've got these nice sexy green ones. So these are all the same length. Some engines you get the ignition leads aren't the same length. Depends how far away from the distributor the plug is, I guess. So I'll plug that on there, and I'm going to leave the one that I took off on there so I can see where it went. So that one is this one here. There we are. Now we're ready for the next one. This one. I'm going to struggle to make them look much neater than that. So you can always check that you've done this right by knowing which way your distributor turns and which is your firing order. So the firing order on this is 1, 3, 4, 2. It's pretty common for most 4 cylinders, but do check in case you've got a weird engine. And again, this is quite typical. The distributor turns anti-clockwise. The rotor arm in there will turn anti-clockwise. So at cylinder 1, we'll then go to cylinder 3. So 1, 3, 4, 2. So I know that I've got these in the right order. And the last one we need to do is the one for the coil. So that goes right in the middle. And over here on the coil. That's a little bit better. Right, so that is all the ignition kind of stuff done. New points, new plugs, new condenser, new rotor arm, new distributor cap, new leads. Fuel filter is done. What have we got left? A pair of air filters, we can do them. We need to do a little bit of imagination here because I've already got the air filters off. So these are the original filters. And they go this way around. In here like that, pancake style filter. So let's just pretend that you saw me turn that off. Hey, that was quick, wasn't it? So there will be a gasket between here and the air filter that you will need to make sure you haven't got any leftover bits of gasket on the carburetor there. And then we've got the new ones here. Oh, that's a tight one. That's nice. Eco-friendly plastic. Stay there. I'm losing all the cardboard stuff. Right, so air filter. Make sure it's the same as the original one, same size. Things like this, if they're a little bit different, it's not the end of the world as long as it doesn't affect the fitment. That gasket, it's a bit naff that, if you can see that. See how it's like been punched out? It's left quite a big ridge on this side. I've got some other ones that came with the carb service kit. There, can you see? This gasket isn't quite flat, it's got like a raised bit where it's been stamped out, whereas this one is a much more uniform shape, and to be honest this one feels nicer, it's a bit thicker. So I'm going to use this SU one. It came with the carb kit. That'll do as a spare. There's probably nothing wrong with that, but you want to be fitting the best quality stuff, don't you? So, bolts out into the new one. Make sure you got your gasket so the holes are the right way. Get this screwed on. This again, fuel pipe isn't original. This isn't 100% on. I deliberately left it a little bit slack because I knew it was going to get in the way. Yep. Now there is a chance I need these back off at some point when I tune the carburetors, but for now we'll put them on so at least they're on. Same again. That replaced. Now I did mention there briefly that I might need this back off. I just think I should maybe explain why I've put them on if I know I'm going to need to take them off. Now, because this is twin carb, you need to have these carbs balanced, so one can't be sucking more air and fuel than the other. Now you do the fueling with the adjustment on the bottom and the idle through this linkage here. That's a nice idle screw there. So you can get the engine running properly, but the problem with it running properly is you don't know if one carb is working harder than the other. So I have like a little vacuum gauge that you can put on the front of the carb, and it pulls a little lever around and it shows you how much air it's actually sucking in, and you can compare the carburetors to each other, so then you can use the adjustment on the carburetor to get the airflow even. You're definitely going to need to do that, but I did want them on just because I like to get the engine running properly and well with the filters on, because that does restrict the airflow. So to tune the engine with the filters on is, in my opinion, better initially, because you've got a more accurate what's the word I'm looking for? More accurate representation of how the engine's going to be in the real world with the filters on. If you tune it with the filters off and then put the filters on, you're then restricting that airflow, which could affect how the engine runs. So I like to have the air filters on. Sometimes you can't, if they're on minis the airbox gets right in the way and you've got to do it with it out. But on these I'm going to leave the filters on, get it up and running, set the timing. The carburetors are always the last thing to adjust, so you need to make sure that your distributor is all in good fell points, plugs, condenser, all that jazz is all in good nick. Tappet gaps, you need to make sure that they are set, because that will affect running. You need to make sure you've got good fuel, you need to make sure nothing is broken, carburetors are rebuilt, and only when everything else is done should you be adjusting your carbs. So we are going to be doing the valve clearances next. So we need the rocker off, rocker cover off I should say. These are dead easy, in theory. Shouldn't say that, should I? Breathe that paint off. Either end, doesn't really matter. Right, so there's lots of ways you can do this. We're going to need the measurements. Should probably find out what it is. Valve clearance. The correct valve clearance of 10 thou or 0.25 millimeters. Okay, that's for all of them. So 10 thou. So let's get our feeler gauges set up before we do anything. Get the right one out. Sometimes with feeler gauges you'll not have one that is the right size for whatever you're doing, but a little bit of simple maths, you can put 2 or 3 of these together to make up what you need. There we go, that's our 10 thou. So that is the gap that we need in here. Now, I suppose we're doing hot or cold. There we go, that's worth checking. The valve adjustment should be made with the engine cold. You can't see that, but I promise that's what it says. Some engines you got to do these when it's hot. Some engines you got to do with the cold. So do double check, make sure you're getting your measurements right, because it will matter. Right, there is a few different ways you can do these, but I'm going to show you the way that I find the easiest. So a lot of people do these with what's called on the rock. So when these two are rocking, you adjust the other end. Now, I don't like doing it like that because I always find that I'm doubting whether these are on the rock, and I like to use what is called the rule of 9, and this is actually how this one is described in the book as well. So what I do is, this is number 1, this is number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So what you need to do is whichever one you're adjusting needs to add up to 9. So when number 1 is fully compressed all the way down, we adjust number 8, and 8 plus 1 is 9, so that's where the rule of 9 name comes into it. Same again, when this one is all the way down, we can adjust this one and work your way in. You'll end up doing these in a bit of a mad order, but it doesn't really matter. Get yourself a paint pen or some kind of marker or something so you can mark the ones that you've done so you don't lose track of where you've been. So let's just turn this engine over. So what I'm looking for here is one that's on its way down. So the number 1 here is on its way down. So when I'm sure that that is all the way down, we can adjust this one at the back. See, now I've got the slack. Now again, you need to make sure you read your book because sometimes inlet and exhaust have different gaps. Luckily on this one it is all the same. I'd say that was a little bit tight. Ah, there we go, that one's alright. So again, just like doing the points, you're just looking for a little bit of drag in there. There we go. I'm happy with that one. So I'm just going to put a little dot on it. so I know I've done it. So now we carry on going round, look for the next one going down. So that one's all the way down, so 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 from the end. Make sure that you do lose your feeler gauge every time you pick it up. Well, that one's too tight. Yeah, that one is too tight. So you don't want them too tight because you'll have a loss of power because that valve is being held open potentially. But on the other end you don't want it too slack because that will come very noisy. And potentially the valve won't open fully. So, get yourself a flat blade screwdriver and the thread size spanner. Just crack that off a little bit so you can turn this. Oh, well. There we go. And then again, just gonna slacken that off and then wind it up until that starts nipping. And got it in the right place, lift that up. Always double check. There we go. Happy with that one. Pen. There we go. Make sure that's nice and clear. Right. I'm going to do the rest. Right. There we go. Get back in the middle. So that is them all done. There was a couple loose, there was a couple that I found didn't need adjusting, and the rest I felt were a little bit too tight. So I've reset all of them to the correct values. And I'm just going to give this a little wipe around the edge. Because we've got a new rocker cover gasket to go on. When I find my little screwdriver. There we are. So this is an old style cork gasket. There we are. And you can tell when these cork gaskets are naff because they go all stiff and hard and no good like this one has. I preempted that. Just gonna clean that rim up a little bit. So, got the replacement. Here it is. You can get silicone ones, but I've always found that a good old fashioned cork one is just better. Now, is this going to behave itself and stay in the gap, or is it going to be a little nightmare? You can just manipulate it a little bit just to try and get it to sit properly. There we go. I think we're going to get it. He says with confidence as it falls off. This way. Right, I'm going to show you a little trick for keeping these in when they end up like that. Because if I just fit that, that's not going to end up in the right place, is it? Because it's just bouncing back. So, got some of this instant gasket. Now, before you start in the comments, calm your passion. I'm not going to lather this all around. I'm using this tiny amount. just where it's needed to stick that cork gasket where it needs to be. See how that's going to hold it there? Might need a little bit more on. What I'm not going to do is smother this all in, because that would be silly and not the right way to do this. You can equally use super glue. I've seen super glue, I've used super glue in the past, but I find super glue doesn't always stick because this is oily as hell. Just going to use a little bit on the edge as well. Right. Should we give that a go, huh? Right, you can see now that is held in place. I haven't used that instant gasket as gasket sealer, whatever you want to call it. I've used that simply just to keep the gasket in place. Oh, and then it drops off as soon as you turn it upside down. Fabulous. I hate doing these. I was too slow there, really, wasn't I? Is that in? Can't tell. Alright, there we go. That is on in the right place. It was a bit of a fanny on, but we got there in the end. So now I've got these nice new washers. These fibre washers are actually missing when I took this off. So we've got new washers and new nuts. And there. And the tools I've lost. Yes. Oops, okay. These don't need to be insanely tight. That'll probably do us. There we go. Put that breather tube back on. There we go. Always make sure you haven't got any wires or pipes or anything trapped in there. Tappet clearances done. Okie dokie. Time to drain the oil. Yeah. It's a little bit awkward just because of where I've got the car and where I've got these axle stands. Right, so got a tool on there. I'm hoping this tub is going to be big enough. Apparently, according to the manual, the engine takes 4.5 litres and this is a 5 litre tub. So let's hope it doesn't run overfilled. Oh, that wasn't particularly tight. Right. Let's see if we manage this without making a huge mess. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Here we go. Let's put rest of that, isn't it? What I need to do is not drop any of this in that very full tub of oil. That's it. I'll dry off. Right. First part is done. Right. Got the oil filter here on the side of the engine block. Now I can't really get anything under there to catch the oil because it's right in front of this suspension cross member just down there. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm just going to stuff a cloth under there. A bit better than that. To try and catch them dribbles. I'll get the new filter ready. I'll just have to do this super quick. So here's the new one. It's a little bit smaller than the other one, but it doesn't really matter as long as the fitting is the same. Oh, that's a bit tight. But I thought it would be, because they always are. So I'll pull out my big pliers. Oh, sorry guys. Right, here we go. How messy can we get? Right, not at all. I think because I haven't had this engine ran for a long time, all the oil's drained back. If that or the oil pump doesn't work. Alright, so just smear yourself a bit of oil on there. I haven't got much oil, I'll get some out of this filter. Right. There we go. Job done. Didn't make a drop. Right, it's time to get some fresh in, huh? So it's time to put some fresh oil in. And for this I've got for the Carlube Artec 2050 motor oil, and this is mineral oil. For old engines like this, I obviously do check your manual specification, but mainly old engines like mineral oil. The modern semi-synthetic and fully synthetic is just a bit too, it's a bit too thin and it's a bit too slippy and it's a bit too good. So always use the right oil. Might not need the funnel, I've got it anyway. This is not sponsored, by the way, just before anybody thinks I'm plugging. I am plugging, but it's not sponsored. I don't have any preference to oil. There's a couple of brands I would avoid just for personal experience, but I'm not going to stand here and say that this is the best oil you can possibly get. There's lots of oils on the market, do your own research. This takes 4.5 litres, which is most of this. This is a 5 litre. I've also put the car back down on its wheels, dropped it off the axle stands just so the engine's level so we get an accurate reading. Rightio then, so I've got about 4.5 litres in there. I'll check it on the dipstick. Right, we're a little bit over. Don't know if you can see that. So here's the maximum, we're about here. That's fine because that oil filter will need filling up, so that level will come back down. So after I've had it running for a little while, I will let it settle and double check that level. No problem. Back on. I'm going to tie this wire up, I just want to wait until I've set the timing. Right, let's see if it runs. Right guys, there we go, that is all done. No disasters, which is quite nice. We've got the oil filter changed, air filters on, fuel filter on, plugs, points, condenser, leads, rotor arm, dizzy cap, tappets reset, and we've also set the ignition time as well that you saw there just at the end. The ignition time and strobe light that I have is quite a clever one. It is from PowerSpark. And I don't know if I've mentioned this on the channel before, but you can actually see vehicle RPM, engine RPM on there, which is very handy, especially in the minis. A lot of them don't have a rev counter, so it's very handy to see. You can see what the RPM is without having to guess. And also, the way I like to do it, I didn't mention this in the video because the engine was quite loud. I didn't want to shout over it. Is instead of trying to calculate how many degrees you need to be looking, especially on the Triumph there was only one pointer on the engine which lines up with a notch on the crankshaft pulley. Instead of trying to work out the right amount of degrees that you need to be around, what I like to do is, instead of setting the gauge to 0, if you set the gauge to the reading that you want, then all you have to do is look for 0 on the crank pulley, and that equates to the same thing. We needed 6 degrees before top dead center. I set the strobe light to 6 degrees, pointed it down at the engine, and waited till the line was in line with the notch, and you know that we're at 6 degrees. Obviously nipped it up there. The carburetors didn't take much fettling at all. They were at the baseline. When I fired it up, I had to fiddle around a little bit with the idle control. I was a little bit slow when I first started up, so I did speed it up. And then you saw at the end there, just bringing that down a little bit. I'm going to give it a drive, make sure that it feels alright. Check colour of the spark plugs as well. But I think we're thereabouts. I'm quite happy with them carburetors. I think they're quite well set up. I'll do a little bit of tweaking here and there over the next few times. Have the engine running, make sure it starts reliably from cold and from hot, and stays running, doesn't cut out or anything like that. Check the colour of the spark plugs. But yeah, I'm pretty happy. We're getting there now. A few little odd jobs. I've got a few little interior bits to put together. Some pipes and things underneath that are a bit dangly that need strapped up. But I think we're probably about there for content that I can film. So if you liked seeing the Triumph on the channel, please do mention it in the comments. Drop us a like. I do enjoy reading comments, so if you've got anything about any of the work that I've done or any of the cars that we've got going on here, hit me up, let me know. But for now, my name is Ed. This is Ed's Mini Empire. I'll catch you next time.